Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning, conversion people, and welcome to Conversion Works London sessions. In this session, we'll be covering the problem with your hypotheses. Now, a lot of you probably think that your hypotheses are perfect and they're going to answer all of your problems. Well, in this session, we're going to find out. Joining me today is the master of memes, the meme lord himself. Please welcome Shiva Manjathani. Have I done that right?
No, Manjunath. But you nailed the first name, which is more important.
How do I say it? How do I say it?
Manjunath.
Okay, cool. Yeah, never mind. Okay, cool. I got close enough. So, give us an intro.
Yeah, so I've been running experimentation programs for probably about 7 or 8 years. Kind of worked across, B2B, B2C, worked at edible arrangements, Norwegian Cruise Line, Gartner, and now I'm helping on the kind of consulting strategy side at Spiro as a senior strategist.
Awesome, awesome. And yeah, so I'm at EXL. You guys know me, or if you've seen other videos, you know me. I'm Ollie. I've been working in experimentation and analytics for about 18 years. So we've got EXL and CXL together, hand in hand. We've got the battle of the extra large, and I've always thought Spiro sounds like you should have your own toothpaste. It sounds like a toothpaste name to me. Do you know the background of like where the name came from?
I don't, but I know a lot of people are like, "Oh, you're like Speedo underwear," and no, we're not underwear. Um,
Nice, nice,
definitely not.
cool, cool. All right, so we're talking about. It's kind of started about talking about how hypotheses are important, but I think we've gone a step further back than that. But to touch on this, so I think, like we said, we're trying in this session, we're trying to kind of take a step back on hypothesis, and I think this is really important. And you guys at Spiro, obviously, you're doing a massive effort in terms of building frameworks, which I love, and it's kind of you're giving back, man. You're giving back to the community. I love it, and I think this is one that is great. So I guess, what is your problem? What is your problem? Um, tell us what the big problem is.
Yeah, so this is a framework that I built out to basically help ground everyone in research backed hypotheses. And as I took a step back, I was trying to understand how do we better link research into hypotheses? And that's where I kind of led into issue identification and problem statement kind of generation, which is the mechanism that connects the two. So ultimately, everything starts with research. For me, everything starts with research, at least. It starts with heat maps, analytics data, customer log chats, you have an abundance of data. Collect as much data as you can. The more data, the better. And ultimately, as you start analyzing and disseminating, combing through that data, you identify a number of issues. So that could be things such as, exit rates on our cart page are astronomically high. It could be people aren't visiting this one particular product that we're trying to move. So other things like that. So those are potentially some issues you might identify combing through some of the data. Then, as you identify issues, you kind of take the Play-Doh of the issue and mold it into a problem statement that is saying, there is an issue with abandonment on carts. That is the problem statement. What I love about this framework too is it gives us the ability to take problem statements, which are a little bit more strategic, and link them with business impact. And I think that's where it's more important. It is theoretically possible to link hypotheses towards business impact, and I think that should always be thought of. But for one problem statement, you could have 15 and you could have however many hypotheses that then solve for that particular problem
Yeah,
statement, or at least
yeah.
attempt to address that problem statement. Can be one, can be many. So that's where it helps keep some guardrails with focusing on the business impact to prioritize those problem statements accordingly. So once you've generated that problem statement to say, let's say, you know, exit rates are astronomically high in the cart page, then maybe you have some hypotheses from there. So if we use that traditional if-then statement, if we do a better job of promoting more checkout options, then we will convert more. That could be a very loose hypothesis, but again, hypotheses are a little bit more strategic. And then from that one hypothesis, to say add more checkouts, such as PayPal, Venmo, whatever it is, then the solution can also manifest in many different ways. So it can be, well, we only need PayPal, or we need PayPal and we need Venmo, and we need whatever. So that's how I think about it in that mechanism. And I think it's also important because this chart is a very loose understanding of how much things branch off. So if you exclusively focused in on solutions, there are a lot of solutions you could theoretically come up with. Yeah. And it's a lot harder to get agreement on a lot of these solutions compared to if you take a couple steps back and just say, all right, brand team, design team, engineering team, business strategy team, do we agree that this is the problem statement we want to focus on? Yes, this is the highest priority. Good. Now we only have these, these 10 hypotheses that we will try and address to solve for that problem statement. Versus if you're just looking at solutions, it could kind of be a lot of solutions, and it's a lot harder to get agreement on those solutions. And they might look at it and say, maybe this isn't worth a solution worth solving for because it's linked to a problem statement that the business doesn't want to move forward. So, yeah, that's a quick overview of the framework.
Got it. Awesome. So what type of problem statements would you be? Would they be purely customer problem statements, or kind of what categories of problem statements would you see within this framework typically?
That's a good question. I think it depends. And I would say it doesn't have to be limited to customer problems. It could be business problems. So for example, if you're trying to understand the impact of, let's say, a pricing wizard or ungating a video demo or ungating valuable content, for example, maybe that's a business problem that they're trying to learn more about. That's not necessarily a customer problem, because the easy customer problem is just ungated. But what is the business impact of that? So trying to understand exactly how to solve for that problem can be business, can be customer, and I think it's more of just identifying problems in whatever way that you see or hypothesize that are problems.
Yeah. Could be technical as well, I guess, in some cases, like this.
Totally.
Yeah. Awesome. And then the research you're going in, I guess I talked about this a couple of weeks ago with Iqbal Ali in terms of where we get our ideas from. And I guess now that we're talking about this, I feel like I want to go back to that session. I want to bring Iqbal into this room in a way, because we talked about where the hypothesis come from, and it definitely feels like we skipped a step in a way. We should have been talking about how we identify our problems, and I think that's really, really insightful. I absolutely love this framework, and in a way, I've kind of used this framework without knowing about the framework in a couple of instances, and I've got one example that I'd love to speak about in a second. But I think sure. So on the next slide I've got what I think we've noted down together some of the benefits of focusing on the problem statements, which I think we can chat about quickly. So I think knowing the problem actually helps you write the hypothesis and do your measurement, because you're kind of then measuring whether that problem is reduced or not.
I'd also add, it makes a hypothesis more thoughtful if you just say, if we add social proof, will increase conversion rate. That's a basic hypothesis. It's not wrong, but take it back to the problem statement. The problem statement is that, well, we don't have any social proof, so we don't even know what the impact is. Or it could be, social proof is at the bottom of the page, but it's just a couple of logos and it's not explained properly. So then that's kind of the issue or the problem statement. And then that leads you towards a more thoughtful hypothesis, which is, we believe that it's, the presentation of the social proofing that's not well explained. Yeah. So if we increase the logo size, if we raise it up on the page, if we explain it, we add links to case studies, then we will see an increase. And it allows for a more thoughtful connection between problem hypothesis to work together towards thoughtful experiments.
I guess it kind of stops people getting away with, when people run experiments and they kind of do post analysis and say, well, it wasn't positive, but they kind of find a reason why it's a positive story and put some
Yeah,
spin to it. So I guess
totally.
if you didn't fix the actual problem, then it's not really a success. You can't just like we'll say, well, it did something for people with one leg, or really niche group of users in a certain scenario on Chrome on a Thursday, whilst they're having a coffee, that type of stuff. Okay,
It also
second thing.
forces you to think about your metric strategy too. I'd say it
Yeah,
definitely forces you to think about your goals and what you're trying to do with this experiment. Again, it's everything for me in this framework is up leveling the thoughtfulness of experiments. It's not, just simply testing out a button color because Google had success with it 20 years ago. And it's not
yeah,
like, trying out something because your competitor had it, even though when you take 5 steps back, it's not an actual problem that your customers face. And you're looking for solutions to problems that may not exist. Ultimately, it's a more thoughtful hypothesis generation, and it helps with prioritization too.
definitely, yeah. So prioritization, second one, easier to size the problem. It's easier to size a problem than it is to predict through all the different frameworks that are flying around, pi, peer, all of those different things, the impact of like a solution or a hypothesis or a solution. You never know until you've tested it, right? Whereas in this case, and in the next example I have, you're able to size the problem by the number of users that are experiencing or getting stuck on a journey, or however you want to try and size it. Um, like you've already mentioned, it's easier to link to business strategy.
And it gets
This
alignment with
one,
a bunch of different people as well.
yeah. So this number three, I kind of like, and I think it kind of I've covered it in one of the previous videos about culture. The death of CRO, that video, um, where I feel like to grow the culture, we need to keep people doing their roles as part of um, the process of experimentation. And I think if you're able to come up with problem statements to then put to designers and user experience guys, then you're kind of protecting them from, I guess, the hippo syndrome, or other lots of people just coming up with hypotheses or designs. They're saying kind of like, this is our new design. Let's work backwards up that stream and go, here's the hypothesis. This is kind of the problem we're trying to fix.
Yeah,
It
I'd
allows those
also argue.
designers. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. I agree with that. And one of the things I say is it allows maybe designers to be exclusively focused on the designs. But I do think it's worth involving them as kind of, if we think about Daisy, adding them as kind of people who are involved or informed as things are moving throughout that process, because their feedback is valuable. I don't think it should simply be, a, uh, what's the word, like a factory.
Yeah, the production line. Yeah.
Production line, right? It should
I
not be a
get what you're saying.
production line. They should be informed along the way. But when it comes to their design, they know exactly what they have to design, and they understand how the sausage got half baked, and all they got to do is just package it up and look really good, and
100%.
push
Yeah,
back if necessary. Yeah,
100%. I guess my point was, I guess, like not designing first. So 100%
yes,
agree.
yeah,
And in
totally
fact,
agree,
I
totally agree.
totally think like UXers in a lot of cases will be in that research phase for sure. They'll be doing the research. They'll be speaking to customers. Looking at session replays, helping the analysts. Because there's always a shortage of analysts, right? We've all experienced that. So definitely helping along the way. Next one, if you do this, help experiments to be backed by research. Yeah, so backing by research are kind of, again, I guess this goes to the point of helping prioritize things. If you know that it's backed and it's evidential, um, then you're gonna get the most be able to target the most valuable problems.
Well, I'd also say it also helps keep people grounded in valuable experiments that are backed in some form of research. A lot of
Yeah,
times, what you'll hear is like, oh, Amazon's trying out this really cool thing. We should try that. And it's like, all right, well, what is the evidence that we have to say that this should be prioritized, should be put in the queue, should be bumped up, we should spend the time needed to build it? And if the evidence is that I've presented a solution that someone else is doing, so we should just do it without any other consequential evidence, kind of goes back into prioritization. But it's saying like, well, no, all you've presented is a solution. We've taken it steps back to say this isn't a prioritized problem statement and it's not backed in research. So you've kind of flipped it around on its head by presenting the solution without following that process of making sure there's research and it's a problem worth prioritizing for the business.
Yeah, definitely. Have you got any examples of where it may be too early, but like evidence that this approach is dramatically more impactful than the Hippo approach or the kind of starting with the solution?
I could tell you just anecdotally, it's a framework that I've used without explicitly putting into paper for 5 years. I will say selfishly, one of the clients I've worked with has won so much using this framework that I've explicitly laid out. They've won so much, their development team literally can't keep up with hard coding all the winners that we've had. So
Awesome.
and it's almost causing some problems, right? Like we're trying to run tests and they're like, stop, we have to hard code this thing that you won like 4 months ago.
Yeah.
So like, it's a really good problem to have, but I think ultimately it's just a tried and true perspective that you should be doing experiments backed in research. Like, if we think about the scientific method, right? People aren't just like going into nature and just eating random stuff on the ground and then seeing if that helps cure cancer, right? Like, there's a process and methodology that we have towards solving problems. Maybe that problem's cancer. Maybe that problem's a diet pill that's probably not going to work. Or maybe it's just research around like what is the best workouts. I've been obsessed with like workout videos and optimizing workouts. So like there's a lot of science going into that, but it's not just like I have an idea, let's try it. It's what is the science behind it, i.e. the research that shows that this is something worth investigating in, because there's a cost. There's a cost to running studies. There's a cost to salaries running studies. Experimentation on web's the same thing.
Definitely. Cool. Yeah, makes total sense. I was going to suggest probably a ridiculous suggestion, but like if you could A/B test this methodology against the old methodology and just prove the Hippo wrong, I'd love to be able to do that. But maybe I'm just taking A/B testing a bit too far.
You could be in the control group. I'll be in the test group.
No. Do you know what? I normally say I don't mind being on the losing side of as long as I'm proved wrong by an A/B test, because then I'm at least advancing A/B testing and experimentation whilst losing along the way. So I'm happy with that. I take that as a win. Cool. Yeah. So real life example of where I've used this by accident before even seeing this. So been working with a cable TV company, and their old product. So basically, they've released a new product where, in the old world, they had a little box that sits under your TV, and that's how you tune in to your cable TV. And in the new world, they've created a TV, and that box lives inside the TV. So they're basically selling screen hardware now. And when they launched, they knew that they didn't know much about this market, and they knew that after a few weeks or so, they realized that their conversion rate was way lower than they expected. So they got us in to kind of look at all the reasons why existing customers and prospect customers were having potential issues. And we kind of decided that the best way was to listen to the customer. Lo and behold, like actually listening to the customer might actually have some value. Surprise, surprise. So we listened to over 300 phone calls, and because their data, like their transcript data for those phone calls was a bit sketchy, we actually manually had to listen to them. So we got a team of 10 people listening to 10 phone calls a day, kind of categorizing them all into different problem areas. You can see some of the results here. I've obfuscated because I can't really talk about who the client is, although if you're in the UK, it may be fairly obvious. Um, and it was absolutely fascinating. It's probably one of the most interesting pieces of analysis we've done in a while. Um, and one of the big things that we found was that existing customers who are moving from the old telly box to the new TV, they didn't understand that they were actually replacing one for the other. They thought they were going to end up like buying but or having both one TV downstairs plugged in to the box and then another TV upstairs, but then paying twice for two connections, which obviously had a massive impact on conversion rate. And once we defined that problem, like I say, we'd done all this call listening. We were almost able to then categorize. I think it was 22% of existing customers. That's the only thing that I didn't blur out here. That exact problem. The 20% of customers were basically calling to complain about that. So we were able to size that problem and go after it. And some of the solutions, like the hypothesis and the solutions, were pretty obvious off the back of that. It's like just tell customers that you're replacing it at the start of the journey, and it was that simple. But I think it kind of paints the picture of how valuable like the problem statement in itself actually is, and then being able to prioritize off the back of that.
So in this case, the problem statement was that expectations were just not very clearly set as to the product. As a result, your hypothesis was, we believe that by adding more information and clarifying, exactly what's being included or what's the process
Yep.
is going to happen, being very clear and transparent, then you'll see extremely positive results. And did that manifest as a test ultimately?
It did, yeah. It manifested itself as several tests,
Yeah.
um, and it was a big win. Not going to quote the exact number because I don't have it to hand, but it was one of the biggest tests we've done for this client, and we've run kind of 400 or 500 different experiments with them, and it's I think almost certainly the biggest win we've had for them.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Framework at work.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, I'd say as well, like if you're not listening to phone calls, listen to phone calls. Like most companies, they ask your permission to monitor the phone call, so you can go and listen to those calls. And I mean, it's fascinating. I mean, there's a lot of chaff there in terms of like sometimes you have to listen to 20 phone calls, and there's like four or five that have real value, um, and it's time consuming. But it's probably I now after doing it, I choose that over going to session replays because session replays is kind of hard to interpret, whereas the voice of the customer, they're just telling you the problem directly, right? So it's
Right.
it's kind of like a no-brainer. So if there's companies out there who are not doing that, 100%, it's like probably one of the most valuable things I've done for any company.
Well, I'd say there's definitely trade-offs to everything. On one hand, the listening to phone calls, you're literally straight hearing from the customer. But on the flip side, similar tactic is like reading live chat logs. And a lot of times, sometimes there's people just complaining or people just typing in
Yeah,
random stuff or really even trolling you. So sometimes you have to sift through some stuff just to find some golden nuggets. But
yeah,
I'd argue the support for this is like it's free. It's literally, I mean, there's a cost to like analyzing, but it's your
yeah,
free research. So there's absolutely no excuse other than maybe prioritization of like your time towards doing that. 300 hours is a lot of hours,
yeah,
but it is free
yeah.
research that you
Free
can and
search.
should absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, free search. It's
Free
amazing.
search.
Yeah, free search. um, yeah, definitely. I think over the next few years, like the natural language processing of phone calls is going to like be a big thing, and that will potentially save us having to like actually listen to customers complaining because it can be a bit depressing. But yeah, it was definitely awesome thing to do.
I'd say
Yeah.
this is a great example to just call out how um, ultimately and I'll even push back to say, like, do you think there was an opportunity potentially to leverage some research to instead of rolling out the product in its manner, maybe conducting a couple extra checks and research to validate
Yeah.
that there was no confusion in kind of the service offering that potentially could have helped mitigate some of the rollout, you know,
Hun-
not
hun-
necessarily
hun-
losses, but complaints.
yeah, 100%. Yeah, and I think it's probably just down to like speed to market,
Totally.
um, and maybe including the right people in the process at different earlier in the process of kind of thinking out the product. I think they'd kind of designed the device um, quite early on, but then the digital experiences were maybe kind of running close to deadline and trying to get out into market before Black Friday, I think it was last
Yeah.
year. Um, so yeah, I guess kind of getting lost in the chase to the finish line. Um, so yeah, I think that's probably a fair comment. Um,
I'd also say like it's okay sometimes to be fast with the expectation that we know this isn't perfect, but we're prioritizing speed with the, you know, rabid data collection, rabid continued iteration. So we're not just rolling it out and set it and forget it. It's a we're rolling out and we're going to analyze the heck out of it as it continues to run and bake. And then just like you did, you launched, you let it run for a short amount of time, you're collecting that research, immediately hypothesized, and immediately pivoted towards another quick test to capitalize on a quick win.
100%, yeah, and I think if we had spent 2 extra weeks, even an extra week looking at it, trying to figure out those problems, then there would have been we would probably be talking about another example right now if we'd
Yeah,
spotted this one, because I guess in a way it's our job to be a perfectionist. It's at least to try and strive and towards perfection or always make improvements, right? As optimization specialists or as product teams generally, you're trying to make it as good as possible. So if we'd spotted this one and we'd fixed it before release, we'd probably just be talking about something else now.
yeah, cool.
Cool. All right. On that note, I think that concludes. Thanks anyone and everyone who's watched this. Please like and subscribe. This will be on YouTube. We're going to post on LinkedIn as well. And watch out for the next one up and coming, which should be coming out next week as well. We're going to be talking about the elephant in the room, or the elephants in the room of A/B testing, and basically the imperfections of A/B testing, or the unsaid imperfections of A/B testing, and the potential solutions to all of those challenges. Should be really interesting. Thank you,
Cool.
Shiva, for joining
Thanks
us
for having
today. Cool. Signing out.